Good evening, everybody. I've been waiting a long time for this. You ready, Gene? I have something for you. I'll give you a hint. It's an email. It's from a reporter. It's about Gene. And I'll share that with you in a few minutes. Now, you must be wondering, who is this guy? And what's my connection to the man that we celebrate this evening? Well, it's really very, very simple. Gene Woods is my friend. About a decade ago, at that time I was the editor-in-chief of the local business journal, Business Lexington, and I decided to assign myself to go interview the new CEO in town. Healthcare has an outsized footprint in Fayette County, Kentucky. So the fellow who was going to be in charge of the St. Joseph system was very important to us. Arriving at Gene's office at St. Joe's, I anticipated brisk, business-like formality. What I discovered was extraordinarily not that at all. The man I was introduced to certainly was impressive for his obvious professionalism, no question about that, but he also had, and this is something I think most people in this room who know Gene Woods will agree with, this unexpected, disarming, genuine manner that quickly makes you feel as though you've known him for a long, long time. It's not what you might expect for an executive who in his mid-30s, I believe, had been only 4 days into his role as Chief Operating Officer at Washington Hospital Center when the horror of 9/11 sent Pentagon burn victims to his emergency room door, and by all accounts, he handled the crisis with aplomb. Later, in the small talk that followed our interview and our conversation, we discovered that we had a pre-existing condition: music. Both of us are lifelong musicians, have played in bands, as you've heard, and have remained faithful to this side of ourselves, keeping our instruments handy to make music whenever the inclination strikes or catharsis calls and time permits. And I have a feeling time is not going to permit much in the next year or so. We put a jam session on the calendar, and it went really well. This guy can play. Seriously. So we put together a band, and we called it The City because its members represented a diverse cross-section of our community, and it was all about providing this killer live music, soul, blues, R&B experience free of charge to benefit the fundraising efforts of local nonprofits. And the whole enterprise was based on the original music of the man who tonight officially became the chairman of the American Hospital Association. Now, what Gene Woods left behind in Lexington is a memorable example worth following. It is this: there's an awful lot of suppressed artistic talent all around us, creative potential that all too often ends up set aside, locked away, in deference to the priorities of a busy professional career, marriage, family, community, all those things that take you away from the muse. But if it is possible to oversee the operations of an enormous, growing hospital system while serving on a laundry list of community boards, to balance all of that against the needs of a young family and still find the time and energy to compose music for and play in a band with a weekly rehearsal schedule, a monthly performance schedule, well, then we learn maybe it's possible and acceptable for others of us with day jobs to engage in our own forms of artistic expression without losing sight of our responsibilities. Now, Gene also left us with something that I think all of you will immediately recognize: the example, and we've heard it mentioned a few times this evening, the example of a living, breathing servant leader. While traditional leadership generally involves the accumulation and exercise of power by one at the top of the pyramid, the servant leader is comfortable enough in his or her own skin to share power, put the needs of others first, and help people develop and perform as highly as possible. And I think that sums up the gentleman seated at this table here. Gene Woods left some very, very positive disruption in his wake in Lexington, Kentucky. Gene moved on, as you've heard, to Dallas, Christus Health, and then to Charlotte and Carolina's healthcare system, where, as president and CEO, he now oversees a workforce of about 65,000, spread across, I think, some 45 hospitals. And now, amid the polarized, complex, vexing controversies swirling around affordable health care in this country, he assumes the leadership of the American Hospital Association. I cannot imagine a personality better suited to this role at this moment in time. That brings me to that email from that grizzled reporter I mentioned earlier. Ed Martin is his name, no relation. Ed has covered healthcare and the insurance industry for 25 years. Now, if back in the 90s you were reading publications of the American College of Physicians or Physicians Practice Digest, chances are pretty good that you read some of Ed's work as a writer. When he contacted me recently in his capacity as a reporter for Business North Carolina, it was to ask a few questions about our guest of honor. It seems that he had been assigned to profile Gene and had heard about our musical connection. He thought that would add a nice twist, nice touch to the story, which of course left us all nervous, on pins and needles, not certain at all how this was going to come out. Well, our concern was put to rest. The article was downright wonderful. It was titled, "Picking Up the Beat," and Ed had used Gene's musical side as metaphor and as a vehicle to tell the story of the new leader of the vast Carolina's healthcare system. I sent a note to Ed, complimenting him on the piece. Now, keep in mind that veteran reporters like Ed Martin rarely share their true personal impressions of the people they cover, if they do at all. So I didn't expect a response. If anything, maybe a thank you. Well, here's what I got. Next day. Gene's the most forthright and knowledgeable healthcare figure I have ever interviewed. No waffling, no hemming and hawing. He utterly is refreshing. In my experience, it's the mark of an executive who knows his profession inside and out and really believes in what he's doing. Despite now heading a $10 billion a year enterprise, I also got the feeling that he's pretty clued into the human side of it. Carolinas is really lucky to get this guy. I agree with that. Now, maybe the most telling testimonial of all about the nature of this fellow comes not from a reporter, not from a colleague or peer, but from someone much, much closer. Writing to me about her big brother, Maria Woods confided, Gene has always set the bar high for himself. He's driven by challenges. He sets goals and works in methodical ways to reach them. He always strives to do his best in whatever it is he's trying to accomplish. He has portrayed this diligent personality since he was young. In 7th grade, Gene was the vice president of the student council at his new school. He spent hours in his room practicing his speech out loud. As his sister and the occupant of the bedroom next door, I hid under the pillow. In 8th grade, at another new school, he received the loudest applause when, at the talent show, he impersonated Jimi Hendrix. He was a self-taught guitarist, playing a guitar that he received from Santa, who he still believes in. So in closing, I'm going to continue with Maria's thoughts about her brother. Gene, she wrote, has chosen a career that has allowed him to make a positive impact in people's lives. His position is not just a job, it's a mission where Gene genuinely strives to make a difference. I'm extremely proud of him and admire many of his outstanding qualities. But the thing that has the deepest meaning for me is that Gene has always remembered where he came from. He is the same brother I knew as a kid, kind, funny, humble, well-grounded, and approachable. Those traits have carried this man through 25 years of leadership experience across the North, Central, and South American healthcare landscape. From nonprofit and for-profit managed hospitals and academic and community-based delivery systems to rural and urban facilities. Named last year to Modern Healthcare's list of 100 most influential people in healthcare. Ladies and gentlemen, our friend, our colleague, a true and genuine servant leader, American Hospital Association Chairman, Gene Woods.